Yes. I was thinking about this. Let's see if I can remember. Yeah, the thing that I've been kind of one way going again and again and again, but there's so many things associated with it or encapsulated in it, or it captures so many things. And as with every word and every thing we have a word for, if you go deep into it, it can be connected to many things. So it's not just a narrow topic when I say this, because it's about attitude, and it's not only the topic of attitude in a way. When you say it in that way, it's like in general, if you say you're talking about trees, you're basically going to talk about basically a ton of knowledge if you go deep enough. So yeah, it's just one way to put it. You can also say perhaps, I don't know, emotions could be a topic line, I don't know, or let's say, yeah, but it gets colored different ways. You can also say it's about, I don't know, not hierarchies, but anyway, the thing that I was thinking about that was sort of novel was that I forgot. Basically about just by the way, when I say attitude, I don't mean, well, you can use that word in a way that you mean like, well, that guy has an attitude. I don't necessarily mean more of, because with then you mean that person got what my father probably would call an attitude problem. But it depends. I mean, having an attitude, I mean, it depends what kind of attitude you mean when you say having an attitude. But anyway, like speech in it, I don't know. No, I actually forgotten why I even started recording, but it was something about taking to sort of what's the English way to express it? When you take a lot of place in a social setting, let's say, now I can't remember it. There was something about that. I mean, I get fragments of it, but I can't put it together in a way that seems like a cohesive or interesting idea or argument. But because now when I have the parts I have now, it just ends up in being something that I don't think of as persuasive argument. So that's sad. But it was something about I guess I guess it's about it was more like, well, I didn't think about it exactly this way, but sort of like the force and all the action, basically, perhaps you could say, you get by just, well, some part of it is perhaps just self-confidence, another part of it is perhaps, I don't know, not anger, but sort of strong resolve, let's say, which can come out of not necessarily anger or brusque, is that a word in English? But blunt, perhaps. All those emotions and those attitudes that are more of sort of just don't give a fuck of what people think or what people I mean, a person who doesn't care at all about how he or she is perceived, or I mean, that's not going to be a person who perhaps even survives or this stuff. But if that person doesn't care at all, I mean, because it won't work as a human being, of course, but to care, don't give a, compared to what most other people don't do, then you, even if it's a danger, you can get quite far in just momentum based action, basically, because there are so many things that are hindering us socially. That's I mean, there are tons of things that you don't do just because you've learned that it is learned or have genes that says that you should not do this, or you should not like in the same way that you're not going to jump from high places or I don't know, drink poison or things that you will know that you'll get sick of. I mean, you just get a emotion that's strong, and it's not an emotion, it's just an instinctual reflex, basically. But perhaps some emotions, depending on what it is and so forth. But it would be quite sublime, also, I guess. But yeah, I'm thinking about this sort of, because what I'm trying to sort of figure out is that there are quite many people who are very outgoing and forward, and not necessarily like assholes. They're not necessarily arrogant, or they're just jolly and happy. And I mean, some people perhaps don't even have a drive or have a pleasure associated with doing a lot of stuff. It's a matter if it's social, they're just sort of. But what I'm trying to figure out is those who do, but do not act, or sort of, like, for example, myself, I don't really I don't know what with those categories that I fit in. It's almost as if what I do want is not I can't see it clearly. It's not tangible all the time. What would sort of in the short term be that bold sort of. I mean, some things are, but when I think about them, I guess I think about them as not only boring, but I guess I feel some kind of not entitlement, but what's the word? Not that I am above the action, but sort of it's so simple that it becomes boring, and when it becomes boring, I guess on some level you feel that you're just but I don't want to lose the main thread here. Yeah, but it's basically this, that you have all people have sort of, I guess, things in their minds, depending on gene and upbringing, that makes you do some stuff and do not do other stuff because of what you've learned or have an instinct for is appropriate. And I mean, especially socially. I mean, there are other things also. I would have accept this social thing, but and when just being commitment consists of same behavior, not doing anything new. But why is it in that in the first place? That's what I meant. And it has to go back to, I guess, what the brain you have, and that's again upbringing and genes. I can't really get a good angle on this topic. I mean, but I do still think that there's quite many things that are due to this. Yeah, I guess it's sort of a battle of attention, perhaps, but it's not obvious. I mean, from a lot of people talking a lot, that's totally failed. So I don't even know if there's a good correlation. I mean, we're thinking school and stuff. I can't see a clear correlation at all. I don't know at all if it's good or bad, like speaking more or less, but how should you put it? I mean, still, because when I'm thinking of someone like sort of Rockefeller, who's quite famous for being quite silent in meetings and stuff, but I guess he still was someone who did stuff with such, I guess, well, real sort of half his biography. It was really a thick one, Titan, but long ago. But I guess when he did speak, we did think with such determination, and so when he was in contact with people, I guess, I mean, suppliers and customers, I mean, in the beginning, and just partners, I mean, of course, it must have been a good way. It has to be spoken a lot, and spoken intelligently, of course, also, and so forth. But And that's perhaps one part of it. It's not just about amount of talk, it's also about how you talk and with what kind of, I mean, it's not necessarily what I was talking about, that these people are quite perhaps even timid and just talks a lot. I mean, just talking a lot is one way of expressing sort of, I guess, some level of confidence, I guess. I mean, you could be really, really unsure and sort of, but so one way among many ways to sort of have confidence of sort of is the amount you speak, but it's still like people can speak a lot that are not confident really, but there's still some security, I guess, if you're still speaking. I mean, you're not threatened through life to be silent. Even that can happen, I guess, not, hopefully not that often anymore, but then it's more subtle degrees of that in that case. But that's a whole other topic. Perhaps it goes into this, but what I'm sort of getting at is that the more, what's the time is it? Oh, wait, yeah, basically that. I mean, if you take the typical seller selling stuff and persuasive, most times is very confident and very, not only speaks out, he's also speaking with quite much confidence and sound as if he or she is competent also, competent and confident, and perhaps friendly, and it depends on, I mean, the seller and what he's selling and to whom he's selling, of course, also. But I mean, to be too like unsure is not, I mean, there are different types of how you get persuaded, but the main thing I'm interested in hearing is, like, if you're going to direct and sort of mold or just practice and better attitude, because however, doesn't matter how good or bad you are at it, I mean, you can always be better, and there are so many nuances to it, and it's so, yeah. And one way of it is just the amount of sort of arrogance, perhaps, as I've been talking about before. And what I'm interested in, how much of that is just translated into action as a counterforce to that, those limits that we have learned or habits or genes to sort of limit. It's because of, yeah, as against genes, and I mean, there's so many things that we don't do just because we have a habit and learn that this is the safe, ordinary way to behave. I mean, so much in the brain is just, I guess, acting out of commitment, consistency, as Munger called it, or just, and that's, I mean, if you do everything as you're doing exactly right now, you're probably quite likely to continue to live, because ultimately, until this, you have lived, and if you continue to do that, you will live. So if evolutionary, it's good for survival to just remain the same, which is not good for, I mean, if you want to advance and do stuff like So it's sort of counter. That's the way evolution works. Sort of not backwards, but it can be in your way, I guess, because it's safe, and safe means survival. And today, that safety is not. We don't need that. I mean, it's not. You won't risk your life for stuff, and therefore, that's good to. To eliminate those forces that does not serve you, but there is danger to it, or what's called flip side of it, or a negative thing with it, and that is that there's sort of a not always win-win. I mean, it can be. I just develop it and just using that for something good. Of course, it's win-win in the long run. But there is one sort of dimension, or one aspect of it that is sort of win-lose, and that is that I guess you more just speak in a social setting. Assuming someone is usually talking, I mean, the more you're talking, the less other people are going to talk. Usually you don't talk at the same time. I mean, of course you can have a higher frequency in words and talk slower, but usually it's like the more time you take up with your talking, the less other people are going to talk. So that's why it's sort of a, not necessarily dominance, but it's sort of a influence, or you're sort of forcing your own thoughts on other people's ears. That's basically what you do when you talk. It's quite brutal in the sense of it's often perceived as very like, but what you're actually doing is like you're actually forcing your own thoughts on people's like minds, which is really brutal actually if you think about it. But it actually is, it's sort of manipulating other people's, you're forcing your own thoughts on other people's heads, not necessarily in a malevolent, or with a hidden bad agenda. It can be, but so that's why it's kind of an arrogant thing for me to say, but when I hear people talk a lot, I sometimes think of it as, not often, but it happens that I think of it as, well, they basically standing in a way, they're only using the win-lose sort of dynamic for themselves to have an influence, and are silencing those that probably had something better to say. And there's also always the responsibility of the person having a lot to say to take that place, I guess. But it also is hard to know how good you are. So the best strategy, just being selfish, is just talk more sometimes, perhaps, unless you're not skilled enough to I mean, you can show your incompetence by talking too, but usually perhaps only 20 to 10% notices that, or even 30%, but they don't care to say anything, and don't have perhaps attitude or arrogance enough to counter your force of words upon people's minds. So yeah, it's quite interesting how it. I'm not necessarily just interested in this sort of. I'm interested in the psychological sort of what's driving behavior in terms of. I mean, there are a lot of factors that does that, but in terms of just how attitude plays a role there. I mean, if you have trained yourself to another way of just going forward, are you going to have a more social outgoing necessarily, or are you going to be more persuasive when you do talk, but not talk more? I mean, Um, I don't know really, and that's why I like to experiment with it and see where it takes me, because it's lots of crucial skills that just, even if it's social or not, just to delve deep into the and just going like straightforward for the same reason that I think, for example, that sometimes I thought of as coffee as quite really good invention is because, or not invention, but something I can realize why it can be really good is that as long as you're not exhausting yourself, which is I guess a big risk, you're actually programmed, I guess, to really save calories. Like for example, exercising. Most people won't do that just because they don't need to, and they're lazy, and laziness comes from saving calories, I guess. So just being more productive. I don't know how that fits together, but I guess it's somewhat similar. But it's also, I mean, if it's only sort of amplitude of how much engaged you're on things, then you could use that. But actually, I do use, like for example, caffeine or for that. Like if I have something crucial to be done, I mean, most people do that, but even like not only task-wise, I mean also socially, it's much easier to take really constructive and good initiatives just after such a simple things. Some things were even better work with alcohol, but that has quite sort of dangerous, you could say, to appear. Yeah. So but yes, I do think that there's, I mean, if again, as I've said in earlier weeks, like if you look at these people, like examples I took then was Zlatan Ibrahimovic and Michael Jordan, sort of really cocky attitudes that's that are crucial for someone to be like become a high performing athlete. Not the only thing, of course, but then you can say if you look at many people like, I don't know, presidents or accomplished in anything it's quite still, I mean, it's not the person that is sort of extremely, what should we say, lazy, and or it depends on what type of laziness, but as Bill Gates said, he wants to hire a lazy person because that lazy person is going to find a smarter way to do it. So it's not only about laziness, it's also about sort of determination, or which is sort of, I guess that's conscientiousness is the reason conscientiousness is so highly correlated with, or the only of the big five that's correlated with success. And one of those sub facets is hard work. So and that's again, but here I'm mostly focused on the sort of social stuff here, because it's so many things that determines your life sort of direction, or where you go in your behavior. I mean, basically every behavior you have, if you have sort of a voice in your head, or whatever you're going to call it, I usually don't like that expression, but because it's so far from what I experienced, but some sort of, there's something in that just feels, oh, are you really going to do this, even if no one's looking, if you're home and you're like, no, this is weird, people will think this is weird, there are so many behaviors that are not like so that we do a social behavior that you won't really do just because of that. What are you've learned it in the social setting that is just weird, and and that's why I so focus on the social stuff, because it's so any conscientious behavior that you're going to involve in is sort of you've learned it in some way, and mostly it's from other people or stuff. So yeah. So but yeah. I'm just going to. I don't want to interrupt the video, so I'm just sorry about this, but I was going to. Taking some magnesium before going to sleep. So yeah. So I think that's. But you could also make the argument, like I said, like it's about a jolly or happiest, or as Munger put it, a cheerful attitude. And yeah, I think it's really a place for that too. I'm not really in the mood. Like last couple of weeks, I'm not really in the mood of going more into that, because it's sort of like, especially if you're a man, I guess you have I've been into this before, but compared to women, you of course have not as much to gain from a smile, perhaps, as women, but it's still a huge amount you can get out of it, like jolliness, mess. Good. Never mind. Because like men in general, especially like males in Homo sapiens, are so much caring oriented compared to many other species that many women would be very, perhaps even afraid, or at least on their guard if they don't see a smile, or if they don't. I mean, the smile could be the thing that's perhaps they would say is the most amazing thing about the person. So there's a lot of, but what I'm getting at is that if you're there is quite strong. Now I actually lost my thought here again. Sorry. I'm too tired, I guess. But this is of course a balance. But like anything, I mean, inappropriate associates with. So fuck it, I should just stop this video. If you're no, I want to get back to the thoughts I had. I guess I'm just too tired and don't have. I mean, this time in the day, I'm not in the mode of just forcing myself to think things through. So I'm just going with old-fashioned patience and just step by step getting let my mind run through the thoughts, and it could be perhaps irritating to listen to. I don't know. I shouldn't say I don't care, but I sort of just I'm not going to take a cup of coffee or take a cold shower that get me super hyped and should I put it, push my thinking as hard as I would do if I was in a life and death situation. I mean, there's always a scale of how much you should just push, and now mine is like, I'm just not going to sleep. I shouldn't care too much about the result. If my brain is tired, I'm going to let it be sort of tired. I don't care, shouldn't care too much. But anyway, so I'm just patiently letting the thoughts grapple with this topic. So I guess I was thinking about sort of how the jolly, happy attitude can get you forward too, of course. But I mean, that deepest resolve, I guess, calm and determination comes more from a more sort of raw attitude, a bit more like, not bitter. I mean, for sure, I just one person that pops up to mind is Warren Buffett, who just seemed to be super jolly and just enjoying his work and going through that. I mean, and that could be the recipe for some people. I mean, for me personally, I'm sort of more of a I was about to say not as civilized and more barbaric. I like the old fashioned, should you say, ideals, or Munger is a little more than that than Warren Buffett is, I would say. Not to say that Warren Buffett is like meek or but he's just nice. Personally, I like sort of this more barbaric sort of, I don't know, masculine approach, more sort of brutal determination of I'm going to do stuff. I mean, and that's why what I've learned, and it's taken, we all have our own sort of mode, and it's perhaps not all usually, perhaps, I don't know, it's, yes, that a lot shines through for when you're developing your personality, both when you're young and when you're acting out otherwise, but there are also probably a lot of things that you don't see, but it also depends on the task. I mean, if it's a more socially oriented thing, or if it's just a silent thing, like for me, it's mostly been a silent thing, but not only, it's been, well, especially when my brain sort of developed, or, well, of course it developed before teenage period also, but what I focused on here is, and it pops up in the mind, is school, like through teenage period, when it's always super duper, I mean, life or death sort of determined for grades and for athletics and track and field. So it was only like the way I thought about the only reason that you don't have a better result is because you don't put yourself hard enough through pain. So pain is the only answer. More pain, more results, and you can always choose how much pain you're going through. So you can always choose to push harder, and then so that's the only recipe for success. Of course, I knew that you have to be smart and stuff, but it was sort of, I sort of liked thinking about it in that primitive way, and that I mean, going for, so the recipe for me then was to go more into like what as least what at least what I thought about as being more just being like this. No, I never saw like the jolly or the happy or the cheerful way to go through it. I mean, I sort of for sure use that as a tool as well, as we all do, I guess, when you're trying to get through something you're so tired, right? So just okay, just to do when you do, and then that's sort of a positive way of, but going more into this sort of dark, more like visionary sort of goal setting or whatever it is, like you see, usually what like just again sort of Zlatan or Michael Jordan is being like extremely competitive and like, yeah, I'm going to and towards that goal, and usually when I say competitive, it's a different nuances. I mean, not necessarily focused on beating others, but you should compare yourself to others, and that's always the case. So but it's anyway, it's and to do that, it's quite a lot of just, I don't know, grit or just but and with that, I mean, yeah, this is not I'm not, when I saying this, not thinking about what is perfect way of doing it. I mean, I think I've gotten, I mean, I've not done everything perfectly, of course. There's a lot of mistakes that I've made, I guess, but even though it's that's actually another topic that's interesting, because I think it's good to see your mistakes, but I don't use for a very long period I was very content with my decisions in some weird way. Why should you be that? That's not constructive, I think. I mean, I guess it comes from just on some, I mean, you have different type of confidence, but some way I have some way of confidence that is sort of, I mean, but maybe that's common, I don't know. But anyway, when it comes to this attitude thing, that's one thing I think I went too far with when it comes to just ignoring signals that perhaps you should, instead of pushing, just perhaps just some other way. But at the same time, so it would have been a more intelligent way. But if I did not have a more intelligent way and had just settled, sort of pushed less, yeah, for sure, I perhaps would have recovered better and sort of getting some good things of that. But I still think I would have been less trained to take pain, and less trained to, and less actually just to learn less. So I think it's, given the knowledge I had, I think it was a good thing, but I should have done other things that would have made me a better decision maker, even though I don't know exactly what did that know, and I do have more knowledge, I guess, what the method would have been, but that's not the topic of now. I'm just saying that not providing this as sort of a perfect way to think about it, but I'm just thinking myself as an example, because it's, I guess I wanted to compare that's sort of the one way to do the not cheerful, jolly way of attitude. But still, again, this was super duper focused on things that was not social at all, almost. I mean, it's social in that context, that all the result was comparable to other people, but it was studies and training in a track and field, which is just extremely, even if it was in a group, which is fine and good, and that all that, and we warmed up with that basketball and stuff, but and talked and sort of great friends and so forth. Still have contact with them today, at least one, at least let me see, I think it's just one. Yeah, I do visit them on the trains, and there's some people left, some few, but anyway, but it's like the performance is not like on doing something that is socially oriented in the acting of itself, because it's a physical and extremely like individualistic sport where you're not cooperating at all, basically. So yeah, and perhaps that's much of the mode I'm still in. I'm like super focused on. No, that's not a fair way to describe it, but no. But yeah, an aspect of that has to be elaborated a bit. Worthy explanation, but yeah, I was thinking about that, because I mean, it's also, I mean, perhaps that's the thing also, because I mean, a lot of I don't know, it's yeah, I'm guessing what I'm going back to the why does not, or does it work as well to have only the jolly and cheerful way of going forward, and that was where I began. Like, for sometimes it could be, if you go doing that too much as a man, perhaps, and I'm not just saying this to a strategy to just attract women or something. I'm just meaning like what will naturally work, perhaps, and perhaps that's also a side effect, of course. Who knows? Maybe the ultimate goal is to mate, as David Buss would argue, I guess, which is, I mean, evolutionarily, I'm not saying, not meaning, and obviously not meaning that that's what should be your goal, but that's what our evolution is programmed for. But I think evolutionarily is perfectly good argument. I mean, it's really, if not rock solid, it's like, yeah, I have nothing to criticize for, but that's not the point here. I just meaning that so what I'm trying to say is that perhaps the what is going to work is probably somewhat of a mix of both, which is quite obvious answer, but not everything that's obvious is understood and practiced. So, but and I'm talking to myself here. But yeah, going back to the sort of barbaric versus civilized attitude, way of dealing. I mean, that's sort of what I say. If you're a man, perhaps you won't perhaps get as much inspiration out of only the jolly, cheerful approach. I mean, it won't snare the depths of your soul. No, but it won't. I mean, it won't. You will still slumber deep in your. You won't awaken the monster. No, but you won't like. Yeah, you know what I mean. It's there is now something, not something raw and brutal, just brute force, badass accomplishment, mindset, whatever, into if it's only like, oh, how exciting. I mean, yeah, perhaps if you want to be a eunuch or something, but most people don't. So to be blunt, I mean, not to be. I mean, there is hilarious people that are really timid, and I'm talking about men here too, that I can admire for stuff. But I'm just thinking what probably will work best for. I guess I happen to now talk about the average male, but I guess it's quite similar for female too. I mean, for women too, females. So I'm not talking about elephants or something. That you will have an instinct to not just only be like this jolly, just happy. I mean, we all have that, but it differs, of course, between male and female. But both those sort of modes is probably what's needed, but at different levels depending on who you are, and if you're depending on sex, the shifts will be different, or the amount, the probability will be different. How much? But it's like length. I mean, if you're tall, or if you're like the average man is longer than the average woman, but there are many women who are taller than men, and you can have any trait that there is a difference between the genders. There's still quite a lot of overlap, and for that reason, I think it's not just has to be. But at the same time, I heard that, for example, stuff like testosterone levels are usually extremely much higher in men generally than in women. Like there's extreme differences. So that's still something that perhaps makes it perhaps the attitude, but that doesn't fit well with, if you think about the fact that there are very timid men. So that's why I think it's to translate that just to psychological attitude way is probably not. I think it's more fitting to think of it as like how tall or how muscular, for that matter. There are more women that are more muscular than men, but perhaps that's more, perhaps I would guess it's not as much overlap when it comes to muscles, or more, yeah, as it is with length. Length is not that. I mean, there are many women who are a lot taller than men, but I don't think it's as common with women more muscular than men, even though that's something that perfectly happens now and then quite often. But just because perhaps testosterone is coupled with length and growth in length too, but I will guess it's more correlated with muscle mass. But anyway, yeah, it's quite interesting though. I don't think I won't go too far in this sort of man and female thing here, or man and woman thing, because I think there's quite many women who do not, I mean, to think of women as sort of the opposite towards, I mean, if you think of a sort of spectrum of men who are timid and sort of really, I don't know, arrogant or even evil. I mean, women, it's not quite different. I can sometimes not even see the difference when it comes to sort of preference for, let's say, what I before joked about as the sort of civilized, jolly Warren Buffett attitude, or the more barbaric, strength, raw, arrogant determination, competition sort of way. But I guess it's a little more to men, but it takes, I guess, a different color in when it comes to women. But so that's like one reason to not delve too deep into that, even though I think in general I actually do think there's underestimation of how much there is differences to men and women. For sure there are a lot of things that are similar. I mean, you shouldn't exaggerate, but since it is evolutionary strategies that sort of molded our behaviors and stuff, I don't think it's really reasonable that our brains are not identical, that there are lots of things that actually are different. I mean, it goes so deep into the animal kingdom to have two different genders and even in plants. Not all of them, but not all animals. But so in general, I mean, different behaviors and that the brains are different. It's perfectly reasonable and logical. But when it comes to just this determination thing, I guess but yeah, I do still think that there's quite some difference there. But yeah, I should there's probably something here that I'm lacking, where should pop up some idea in my head that doesn't pop up because I'm tired. That give a better nuance to this, but it doesn't. So anyway, but how I think it's this purpose of this is, I guess, to realize what attitude is constructive and how to make it better, yeah, going back to like sort of cocky or confidence wise, or just momentum in just both confidence in what you're accomplishing when you're on your own, but also at work and what you're just sort of, if you're involved and just going forward. What's sort of fruitful in that, and my sort of theory here is that to foster or just to develop a more careless, I guess, attitude towards social consequences is it is really dangerous, because there are so many behaviors that in humans that you're going to look at and be like, what the heck? I mean, there's so many things that just are weird, but at the same time, it's like there's so many things you can do that would be amazing for you as a person, I guess, if you just did them and just didn't care at all about what people think. And usually you don't, I don't know, but it's not, I don't know if I like this display. I don't care about what people think. I mean, it's usually people, yeah, for sure, that's what's happening, but for me at least, I mean, the reason I don't do things that I should do is not as at least as I think of it, not that I think that people are going to think. It's just my brain realizes, and in sort of unconsciously, that's a consequence and a sort of danger, because it prefers to do things as I've done it before. The brain does not want me to just go into this. So I'm not thinking, oh, they are going to think, but it's more like just comes up as a drive towards doing this specific behavior instead of another that perhaps would be more constructive. And I don't notice it myself, and I'm happy to. If I do notice it, I have a chance to alter it, but usually that's the danger. You don't always do. But yes, and I also think, by the way, is talking about another discussion when it comes to visions and what you want with life and where you're going, and if you have a sort of mission, if that goal is sort of aligned with that action, it's and I, for example, think of a lot of things that I think I probably should do, even if it's hard to know if it's the right decision, but usually it's best to just test it, I guess, because usually perhaps it's not that big of confidence testing. I think one reason for me that I at least experienced that one issue could be that the goals that I'm putting forth for myself, and if I'm going to do things that other people have done successfully, is that the sort of semi-long-term / sort of how long-term, I mean, it's really long-term, that the reward for me is like for what those, I mean, perhaps even the thing is that I think about this in a way that's not constructive, because usually the success that perhaps other people would see as a success, perhaps as if I would be successful with my company right now. Usually, I just see that as a stepping to something that would actually be interesting and inspiring. And that's perhaps, I don't know if that's solved the problem, but it's not exciting enough for me to feel like, oh, that would be amazing. So when I do this, I will get no, and my brain goes, no, the reward is not there yet. Even though I do this successfully and even make a lot of money, I know for sure that when I think about it, for sure I would feel amazing if I do it, but it would still be something that would be like, okay, my brain is, I think, like thinking about it as, or just thinking that it's so far away. No, I don't know. It's actually interesting, because I don't experience. Yeah, I don't. Hard to dissect this topic, sort of, because at the one hand, it's so far away, and it's just stepping stones that I have. It doesn't matter how many I do of them, I will still have huge way left. On the other hand, it's just that those rewards are just around the corner. So it's really, yeah, I don't know. It's but I actually do think, behavior-wise, it's not that far away as I perhaps thought about it sometimes. The reason I brought this up was that I just thought about just attitude and motivation and stuff, and I sort of wanted to underline the importance of having sort of a vision or something, because it's important to have that. Because for me, for example, I think of that as a sort of not a finished chapter, but sort of as I have had those years when I went through that, so I'm sort of in my mind crystal clear where I'm going. Of course, you can make new versions, and you always continue to update, and your mind is always, and your ideas are always evolving, but that's sort of not easier. So I thought about it as if that helps me, but when I thought about, I'm usually sort of on the negative person, usually are not content with my accomplishments because I want more. So I started to think, well, maybe that's why the previous discussion, that perhaps I do not have my sort of medium goals enough close to what would be inspiring. And those, so yeah, I don't know. And I'm going back and forth, thinking of it as sometimes exciting, sometimes just like, yeah, whatever. I'm going to another place anyway. So, and that's sort of an arrogant thing to say in itself, not to be satisfied with that. Well, that's sort of almost entitlement vibing, but and I also thought about is that really, do I think that or is it sort of a way to sort of protect myself, or have an explanation to avoid thinking of it as, but I do have a quite hard time to be really, I mean, it's really have to be epic for me to aim for it, and at least after more consideration, because earlier in life it was like you haven't formulated the goal yourself in the same way when it comes to grades and athletics, and now in hindsight it's like, no, it's not inspiring at all. But it was a constructive aim for developing physique and brain, but at least some part of the brain. So yeah, it's hard for me to understand if I'm aiming my medium term goals are close enough to what I want to, if that's the problem, or if I have problems with other things. I mean, we all have problems, but what's more the most bang for the buck to focus on, and altering in method and thinking and stuff, that's yeah, but going back to the aptitude things, once again, I do think you get, if you just imagine you would be really a cocky asshole, a really cocky, arrogant asshole, what would happen? It is an interesting thing to think about, because of course there are a lot of things that can go wrong, but what I'm trying to think about is if that's used, and then from that, I mean, that's an obvious case where you're probably going to have bad consequences, and what can you scale away from that and get into something that's just going to propel you forward. And I guess it's just, I don't know. For me personally, I do think actually that if I would just pick up some of my old, what I had when I was younger, that I sort of trained myself out of, or at least consciously like try to stop using and start, because if you're just aiming and working hard and hard and hard and not sort of taking the bigger perspective, you're exhausting yourself and you're perhaps going in the wrong direction. And but if you want to go in that one direction, I mean, for sure. But if you don't want to be a boy band, it's no, I'm just kidding. But so if yeah, so I do think that I do want to get back to sort of what I was a little bit more like before, because I've gotten over to a sort of super lazy mode. In some way lazy, I mean, it depends on you, but I only, for a long period, I only did what I felt like doing, and that happened to be the most enlightening and useful thing that I've done. But that was also perhaps because I've already served as a slave in school and sports. So I had, I guess, a good enough brain to do something constructive with it. I guess I don't know if that's a right way to think about it, but I actually do think that's quite true. But to then just so, but I again I had a sort of, I only went for, I had for sure discipline, but I was mostly guided of what actually seemed like interesting. I mean, it's such a process to go through what you want in life and all that. Like 20 years old and those 20, like 19, I think it's 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. I mean, by 24, 20, yeah, somewhere there. There's so much that sort of I had sort of of course there's big like push, sort of what you call it, to do well. I mean, time's going, even then you thought about time's going, you want to do stuff faster and nothing was happening and stuff. And so describing how that process is, yeah, will take days. But then I was so much because I was not a slave to the school anymore. And I could just live on that wave of knowledge that I had slaved up, or whatever you want to call it. I could just use that to make good decisions, and I happened to decide that one of the big names would actually be to optimize for knowledge, because then I would be better suited to make a good decision, whatever that decision would be. So and for that reason I could postpone things even more, some things, but I also did things that was figuring out what was if David Hume actually had something to tell me, or if he was just a crazy old guy. I'm kidding, but so, but I actually do think that I would get back to some of those more earlier, and I've thought of this sometimes from time to time, and but it is quite, I mean, it's amazing mode to be in, this like high determination, sort of going forward, enthusiastic vibe, but it's also, I think, important to, you can always develop the nuances to it, and of course it's always there depending on the task and the circumstance. I mean, every behavior that you ingrained so deeply, and especially in those years when the brain's developed until, I don't know, 25, they will be stuck there for the rest of your life, for good or bad. But I actually wish to get back to some of those sort of, not hardworking, but perhaps the attitude that I used to get through the hard work. Because working harder, I don't know, I mean, perhaps in weekends and stuff, doing some hours that I could work. But because now I'm at the job, like actually recently is going to full time, so then I can't. I mean, of course, you could do some stuff like for example, I do this video. But if you do stuff that's not sort of extremely demanding, perhaps, but usually doing those stuff that you feel are like going through to something that's to a goal is quite engaging, because it's the way forward. So, and I do that on weekends sometimes, but doing it with perhaps more of that attitude, I don't know. And I think there's so many things that's not going into this discussion, that I mean, there is also opportunity costs to thoughts. I mean, there's always a better thought somewhere, and that's the way it is with life. Everything is on a scale. Time's ticking. 1 hour and 70 minutes. Anyway, I'm going to sleep in sort of 15-20 minutes. But yeah. I do think that this is very important. Actually, extremely important. Extremely important to focusing on attitude. I mean, I think, I don't know why, but when I do think about this, I happen to think about when I'm standing in the shower at my parents, this was some thoughts that went through my mind a couple of times in teenage period. Perhaps the most latest version is perhaps from, I guess, when I was studying at after high school. So I mean, what I guess we call college, like at university, sort of. Perhaps that's the memory I have from it. I don't know if it's been several occasions in the shower, or it could be from high school when I was studying in the shower. But I was obviously thinking about it multiple times. But I think I tried to sort of circle down the most important things in life, I guess. And I sort of boiled it down to two things. And perhaps I've been talking about this in earlier videos. There are so many now, but I boiled it down to, I think, it's quite sad I don't remember. It's so long ago I was thinking about this. But one thing was the attitude thing, and the other thing was the love thing. That's how I sort of thought about this sort of two most, I think it was those two. I'm not 100% sure on any of them, but I think attitude was one, like just how you're sort of switching your sort of where the heck you're going, what you're going to do, and how you just make sure how you're dealing with your brain and your attitude, whatever, to just do whatever you're going to do, and how you're going to, what are you going to do with your, or just generally just how you're I mean, should you be in like in a, oh, this is just, I don't know, this is just, I don't like this, and I don't care, and it's tough, and it's perhaps too tough. I mean, I guess manga would call it just self-pity, I guess. But I mean, it's not even like even super short term. It's not even the state you want to be in your head. I mean, it's, I don't say disgusting, but it's not nasty. It's a nasty place to be. It's not nice. I mean, it's, I mean, I don't know. I can't say I've even a memory of being. Well, I guess every child, I guess, have that sort of entitlement. I guess it's sort of not. Anyway, but that was, so it was basically only that attitude thing and sort of the love thing. There were so many things associated with that I can't really remember. And going back to what I discussed, I think it was a previous video about sort of this is all actually just remnants of those thoughts if I think about it, because I remember even that, I'm quite sure even in that thought, in that same sequence, in that when in shower, in if it was in high school or if it was when I was studying, I don't know, but that sort of the love thing and the attitude thing was talking about the goal yesterday, about them sort of not appearing to, I mean, there's always a danger only being sort of meek or sort of caring. I mean, if you're doing that to the most evil imaginable, instead of beating that most evil imaginable with the same medicine, I don't know, or even a better medicine. If you don't have that is sort of attitude thing, I guess. So to compensate, to protect sort of the moral and ethical duty that you have towards all living things. To compensate that, to not be vulnerable and be open to exploitation for that ambition, you have to have the attitude, I guess I called it the attitude, to basically have so much power, you could say, in the most widest, I mean, it could be physical, it could be knowledgeable, it could be bite strength if you're aiming for the neck, you know. should make this too raw, but I guess it was just my way of sort of getting those both sort of that spectrum, navigating those fuck English, båda de två things. Inte jag lite kaxig där, va? Sorry. And yeah, that was my train. When I said I actually, as I said, what I said in the last video is when I realized, or think about it, is basically remnants of what I actually already back then thought, which was that, and I do again think this was in the same sort of sequence in my head at the same occasion, even though of course the building block for that had been multiple, like through teenage period, I don't know, but from that, even if it's now, I don't know if it's again high school or college, university time, but like it's thinking about sort of Hitler and Nazism as sort of an, well, back then I thought of it as society as sort of an trying to sort of balance the atrocities and the extremes of Nazism to something more sound. We had to make sort of a counterbalance, and I thought of it as sort of I knew it was a too simplified model, because you want to go so far away from that as possible, but my way of dealing with this sort of, you can't just be meek and friendly and jolly, was to say that, well, maybe we went too far. And I do think that's still true to some extent. I mean, only just because something is inherently bad, it's just necessarily that you do not want to understand it and all the aspects of it, because aspects of it can still be like constructive to understand and use, sort of like the atom bomb can be used, or knowledge about it, what's it called, atom knowledge, whatever, could be used for good and for bad. I mean, not like atomic weapons, but also for energy, and perhaps not all people like that type of energy, but it's the general point of knowledge, so and so forth. So, and then so, and I guess that was my way of saying that I thought of the world in general being too, I mean, it was so lame, and in some ways, I don't remember how I thought about it exactly, to be honest, but I must have thought that if I come to the conclusion that we went too far, but it's a very it's very blunt and open to very much misinterpretation when I say like that. But we have like my today speaking is we need a much more nuanced way of understanding it, I guess, human nature, because it's not only about being the nicest. I mean, the ultimate goal is to optimize for as much goodness as possible, but getting there is not to be like meek or just there requires a among any things, to fight evil. And if you're going to fight evil, you're going to have to be, you're going to have to possess strategies that are crushing those strategies, was one way to put it. But it's always that's evil thing that I was talking about latest. It is because that's really interesting. All that evil sort of stuff. I mean, there's such an easy, that's a really slippery slope. If you're talking about sort of the how easy it is to go even further into that as a sort of strategy. It's so simple of a strategy that it's anyway, and simple in the sense of that it's, I don't know, obviously bad, but and perhaps that's also the reason to this discussion in the first term. I mean, if you're as a sibling if you're screaming much more than your sibling, if you're a bird, you'll starve your siblings to death, I think. So if you talk more, you deprive other people mating opportunities, perhaps, and you're lessening the likelihood, especially if you're a man, that the genes are going to, you're basically killing them, or their genes, which is basically killing you if the genes are not, I mean, evolutionarily. So it's quite serious. I mean, I know I'm now actually putting a sort of blame on people talking a lot, I mean, speak can be used for good, but it's still, I don't know, it's actually, no, I'm actually lost the comprehension of what the association was to that, why I came to that. But it doesn't matter too much. Or does it? Who knows? Yeah, I guess I'm trying to finish this video, but I just want to end on a note that is satisfactory. Yeah, I was talking about sort of my mind is shifting back and forth, understanding what I just said, not understanding what the fuck case that sorry for the choice of words, but I'm just trying to, what the heck was it that I it is really, really interesting how much yeah, I'm just, so let's quote the previous video. I don't know if I can put it better than I did there, but it would be interesting to connect it to this speak thing. And I guess that's what I mean, the most evil things that survives are those that are not detected, and especially if they're on sort of the most, so I don't think that the bird example is probably a good example. And I do think, I mean, strategies, everything that's happening on a daily basis is like evil play and good playing out always, but it is hard to notice actually. I mean, and you only also noticing a fraction of it, I guess, depending on how I don't know, smart you are and stuff. You're noticing more, but it's, I mean, there's so many things that you don't notice, and that's, and if since it's continually, it's on such, it becomes on such a scale that it's that's why when you say small acts of kindness and stuff, I do believe in that, but usually, or depending on the situation, is so focused on long term, so I forget that. But I guess it's because I think I'm destined to do something at least as good and great as possible, but and then you sort of start to think that, well, that doesn't matter, but I guess it matters. It matters a lot, because every person thinking that it matters, it is good, and why should I think that I should not do it because I'm later going to do something even better and more contributing? I mean, it's probably not a constructive way to think about it, but anyway, that was not the topic. But it again depends on the situation. Mostly I like to have a win-win wherever interaction I basically have. That's obvious thing to want that, but that's not the case for everyone, for sure. And usually, if you're as long as you're not turning that person around completely, which is a quite impossible thing or a really hard thing to do. I'm not sure if there is a really benevolent or malevolent, not really good person at all. I mean, I guess you want to win or lose. yeah, again, just this evil thing. I mean, it's again this thing that it is extremely interesting because every time you're sort of beating, let's say, evil, you can always portray that as, well, you're the silly one that you're the silly one that think you're going to be the hero, good hero, as a sort of, that's exactly is what the slippery slope is, as a sort of protection, or I don't know, of the evil sort of stuff. And I wonder why this is so easy to think about. I don't know that this makes sense, but in my mind it's sort of crystal clear that there's sort of a switch of those sort of, and one way is, and one reason is perhaps, as I've said, that we're so far from some, I mean, acting out on a daily basis, we're for sure evil to each other in ways that are so subtle that we don't notice it, and in other ways as well, and obvious ways. But I guess it just, there's so many this is the issue, this is why this is so hard, because there's so many, I would describe it this way, how crazy it doesn't matter how crazy it seems, because there's so many constructive, and you could say even good, I mean really good qualities that in some ways are very associated with evil, at least in my mind, and that doesn't mean that it's hard to sort of dissect what it is. So I mean, the only purpose of this is, of course, to contribute to as much good as possible, but it's not obvious how to I guess it's just a tit for tat thing. I mean, but I also think about this sort of story-wise, this sort of not appearing to be the meek hero stuff. But I think I'll have to close it here. It's I think my soul is starting to get possessed by the devil, so I just have to battle my demons. No, bye bye.